History buffs, welcome back to the channel where we don't just skim the surface, we dredge the depths. Now, be honest. When you hear Middle Ages, what pops into your head? Knights in shining armor, fair maidens in flowing gowns, epic feasts in grand halls? Yeah, Hollywood and fantasy novels have sold us a pretty picture, haven't they? A time of chivalry, honor, and, well, mostly just a lot of well-groomed horses. But what if I told you that idyllic vision is about as historically accurate as a dragon in a documentary? What if the reality was so brutal, so filthy, so utterly unforgiving that you, yes, you, with your fancy smartphone and your expectation of, oh, I don't know, not dying from a splinter, wouldn't last 5 minutes? Forget a day. We're talking mere minutes. Today, we're not tiptoeing through the tulips of medieval fantasy. We're wading, neck deep, through the cesspit of medieval reality. We're going to strip away the velvet and find the vermin. So, if you're ready to have your historical illusion shattered, hit that like button, subscribe for more uncomfortable truths, and let me know in the comments, what's the one modern convenience you think you'd miss most in the 14th century? Mine's probably soap, or antibiotics, or breathable fabrics. Okay, it's a long list. Let's rewind the clock. The year is, say, 1345. Pre-Black Death, but still deep in the muck. Congratulations, you've just time-traveled. And your first thought? What? Is that smell? Forget your memory foam mattress and your Egyptian cotton sheets, your new bed, a pile of straw on a dirt floor, probably half rotten, definitely crawling with fleas, lice, and things that scuttle in the dark. Oh, and you're not alone. Your entire family, kids, grandparents, maybe a couple of chickens and the family pig if it's cold, are all snuggled up in this one-room, windowless hut. Privacy? That's a hilarious concept from the future. The air itself is an experience. Imagine a potent cocktail of unwashed bodies. We'll get to bathing, or the lack thereof. Stale beer, animal manure, wood smoke that never quite leaves, and a damp, earthy aroma that hints at mold and something vaguely decomposing. Scented candles? Not invented. Air freshener? Please. This miasma is your new normal. Now, nature calls, and it's not calling from a porcelain throne with a handy flush and a roll of quilted softness. If you're a peasant, you're looking at a communal bucket in the corner, or maybe a designated patch of ground outside, already full? Tough. Add to the pile. And when that bucket is full, guess where it goes? Yep, right out the window or door, hopefully with a cheery shout of, "Gardez-vous!" That's watch out for the water in Old French, though honestly, the streets are already open sewers. A charming slurry of human waste, animal droppings, rotting food scraps, and mystery liquids. Urban planners, they were not. Even in a castle, it's not much better. The garderobe is literally a stone chute that drops straight into the moat. Sounds ingenious until you realize that moat isn't just for defense, it's a giant, stagnant toilet bowl. And yes, attackers occasionally tried to sneak in through these, back doors. Talk about a crappy way to invade. Right, you've navigated the morning ablutions. Time for a hearty breakfast to fuel your day of back-breaking labor, right? Prepare for pottage. This, my friends, is the medieval superfood, or more accurately, the medieval whatever we can find and boil it for days' food. A thick, gloopy stew of grains, oats, barley, maybe some rye. Whatever root vegetables are on hand, turnips anyone, and perhaps a few beans if it's a good week. This pot simmers perpetually over the fire. New ingredients are just tossed on top of the old. It's less a recipe, more an ongoing edible science experiment. On the side, a hunk of bread so hard it could double as a weapon, made from coarse flour often bulked out with less desirable ingredients like sawdust or ground acorns in lean times. White bread was a fantasy for the rich. This dark, dense loaf is your staple, and to drink, not coffee, not tea, not even fresh orange juice. You're drinking ale, weak ale or small beer, mind you, but ale nonetheless, even the kids. Why? Because the water is a microbial minefield. Rivers and wells are contaminated by all that waste we just talked about. Brewing the ale, even a weak one, involves boiling the water, killing some of the nasties. So it's the safer, albeit not exactly hydrating option. Fresh fruit and vegetables, seasonal and often gobbled up by those higher on the food chain. Meat, a rare treat for peasants, maybe a bit of bacon or salt pork a few times a year if you're lucky. Spices like pepper or cinnamon, more valuable than your annual earnings. Salt was precious. Your diet is bland, repetitive, and often nutritionally deficient. Scurvy, rickets, and general malnutrition were just part of the scenery. You're not eating for pleasure. You're eating to not die today. All right, you're fed, sort of. Time to get dressed for your big day of more suffering. Your wardrobe, lavish. You have one outfit, probably a rough, scratchy woolen tunic or a linen shift if you're slightly better off. You wear this every single day for months, maybe years, until it literally disintegrates. Washing? A luxury. It involves hauling water, heating it over a fire, consuming precious fuel, scrubbing with harsh lye or ashes, if you even have them, and then hoping for enough sun to dry it. Most people just didn't. So your clothes are stiff with grime, sweat, and whatever else you've encountered. And this brings us to your constant companions. Fleas, lice, and bed bugs. They are everywhere and on everyone, from the lowest peasant to the highest noble. Itching was a universal medieval pastime. You'd see people casually scratching themselves in church, at market, even in court. Skin infections, rashes, scabies, all par for the course. There's no hydrocortisone cream in 1345. Your skin is a permanent battleground. Feeling a bit gross? Don't worry, everyone else is too. Now flash that winning medieval smile. Oh wait, oral hygiene as we know it, non-existent. No toothbrushes, no minty fresh toothpaste, no floss. Some might chew on a twig or rinse with wine or vinegar if they're feeling fancy, but for the most part, teeth were left to fend for themselves. And they lost. Badly. By your mid-20s, if you even make it that far, your mouth is a horror show. Rampant cavities, swollen and bleeding gums, rampant decay, and breath that could knock a buzzard off a corpse wagon. Toothaches weren't an inconvenience. They were a chronic, agonizing affliction. And if a tooth got really bad, your friendly neighborhood barber surgeon would be happy to help. Yes, the same guy who cuts hair and performs bloodletting, more on that later, would yank out your offending molar. Anesthesia? Maybe a strong swig of ale and a prayer. Tools? A terrifying array of iron hooks and pliers, probably not cleaned since the last poor soul sat in the chair. An infected tooth could easily lead to sepsis and death. Something we treat with a quick trip to the dentist and some antibiotics could be a death sentence. kissing must have been an adventure. So you're smelly, itchy, your teeth throb, and you're vaguely malnourished. Perfect. Time to head to the fields. If you're part of the 90% peasant population, your life is dictated by the seasons and the whims of your Lord. You work from sunup to sundown, 6 days a week. Sunday is technically a day of rest and prayer, but if the harvest needs bringing in or the Lord demands extra labor, guess what? You're working. Your tools are rudimentary, a wooden plow, if you're lucky enough to have an ox, which you probably share, a sickle, a hoe. Your back is your main piece of equipment, and it will break long before it's time. Imagine you're a serf on a manor in England. You don't own your land, you work it for the Lord. A significant portion of your week, maybe 3 days, is spent on the Lord's personal land, the demesne, unpaid. Then you have to work your own small plot to feed your family. On top of that, you owe him a share of your produce, maybe some chickens, some eggs, the dreaded tithes, both to the Lord and the church. You can't leave the manor without his permission. You can't marry without his permission. Your children will inherit your status. It's a life of obligation with very few rights, and it's not just men. Women toiled in the fields alongside men, plus all the household chores, grinding grain, baking that rock-hard bread, brewing ale, spinning wool, mending those precious single outfits, and, of course, child care. And speaking of children, they weren't coddled. From the age of 5 or 6, they were expected to contribute, scaring birds from crops, gathering firewood, tending smaller animals. School? For the vast majority, that was a pipe dream. Literacy was for the clergy and the very elite. Accidents were common. A slip of a scythe, a kick from an ox, a fall from a rickety ladder. Any of these could lead to a crippling injury or a fatal infection. There's no workers' comp, no sick leave. If you don't work, you don't eat. And if you die, well, there's always another desperate peasant to take your place. Think your workday is over? Not if the weather has anything to say about it. And in medieval times, the weather wasn't just an inconvenience, it was an active threat. Your charming one-room hut, with its thatched roof and wattle and daub walls, offers minimal protection. Winter, it's brutal. No central heating, no insulation. The gaps in the walls are big enough to throw a cat through, though you probably wouldn't. Cats were sometimes suspect. Firewood is precious and often controlled by the Lord. You might be forbidden from gathering it in his forests. You huddle around a smoky, inefficient fire, wrapped in your single damp woolen garment, constantly cold. Frostbite wasn't a diagnosis. It was just bad fingers. Summer, equally delightful. Your hut becomes an oven. No fans, no air conditioning, definitely no deodorant. You're sweating buckets in your heavy wool, but stripping down isn't an option. Modesty, sunburn, and the relentless assault of flies, mosquitoes, and other biting insects. And you still have to work under the baking sun. Heat stroke was just a bad turn. Droughts meant famine. Too much rain meant ruined crops and more famine. A bad storm could flatten your home. You were utterly at the mercy of elements you couldn't control or predict with any accuracy. So, inevitably, you get sick or injured. Time to call the doctor. Except medieval medicine was a terrifying blend of superstition, incorrect theory, and well-intentioned butchery. The prevailing medical theory, inherited from the ancient Greeks, was that of the 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Illness was caused by an imbalance of these humors. Got a fever? Too much blood? The cure? Bloodletting. Leeches were a common tool, or the barber surgeon would simply open a vein and let it flow. You're already weak from illness. Now you're also anemic. Brilliant. Think of the agonizing end of King Charles II of England in 1685. A bit later than our 1345 setting, but the principles lingered for centuries. When he had a seizure, his physician subjected him to a horrifying barrage of treatments. Bloodletting, 16 ounces, purgatives, enemas, blistering agents applied to his skin, powders made from human skulls, and forced vomiting. He died, unsurprisingly, after days of this torture. While our 14th century peasant wouldn't get this level of intensive and expensive malpractice, the underlying philosophy was similar. Drive out the bad humors through aggressive, often painful, means. Germ theory? Centuries away. They believed disease was caused by miasma, bad air, divine punishment, or witchcraft. Surgery was a last resort performed without anesthesia or antiseptics. Survival rates were abysmal. Childbirth, as we'll see, was a life-or-death gamble for women. A simple infection from a cut could kill you. The plague, when it arrived in 1347, would demonstrate just how utterly powerless medieval medicine was, wiping out a third of Europe's population. Life is cheap, and so is justice, for the powerful anyway. For the common folk, the legal system was often arbitrary and incredibly harsh. Crime was rampant, fueled by desperation. Punishments were designed to be brutal public spectacles, a deterrent, and a form of grim entertainment. Steal a loaf of bread? You might lose a hand. Gossip too much? The scold's bridle, a metal mask of humiliation. More serious crimes? Hanging, burning at the stake, beheading, drawing, and quartering, all performed in the town square for everyone to see. Trial by ordeal was a popular method for determining guilt if evidence was scarce. Could you hold a red-hot iron bar and have your hand heal cleanly in 3 days? Innocent. If it got infected, which it almost always did, guilty. Thrown into a river? If you floated, you were guilty, aided by witchcraft. If you sank and drowned, you were innocent. Congratulations. Violence was a part of daily life. Bar brawls, feuds between the families, noblemen casually striking peasants. War was almost constant. Lords battling lords, kings battling kings. Your life could be snuffed out in an instant, with little recourse. In this chaotic, terrifying world, one institution stood as a pillar of certainty: the Church. Its power was immense, its reach total. It dictated not just your spiritual life, but your calendar, your holidays, your morals, even your understanding of the universe. The local priest was often the only literate person in the village, the interpreter of God's will. Hell was very real, very vividly described, and the fear of eternal damnation was a powerful tool of control. You paid your tithes, a tenth of your produce or income, without question. You attended Mass. You confessed your sins. Questioning church doctrine was heresy, punishable by torture and a fiery death. Superstition was rife, often blended with Christian beliefs. Relics, saints, and miracles offered hope. But the underlying message was often one of obedience and acceptance of your harsh lot in life as God's will. If life was tough for a medieval man, it was a special kind of hell for a medieval woman. All the dirt, disease, and drudgery, with an extra helping of subservience, and danger. A woman's life was largely defined by men, her father, then her husband. Marriage often happened young, sometimes in early teens, and was usually an economic or political arrangement, not a love match. Her primary duties were to produce heirs, preferably male, run the household, and obey her husband. Domestic abuse was, sadly, common and largely accepted. Childbirth was the single most dangerous event in a woman's life. With no understanding of hygiene or modern obstetrics, complications, hemorrhage, and infection meant mortality rates for both mother and child were terrifyingly high. If she survived, she might go through 10 or 15 pregnancies, each a roll of the dice. Women had few legal rights. They couldn't typically own property independently, inherit titles, or pursue many professions. An outspoken or unconventional woman risked being branded a shrew, or worse, a witch, a death sentence. Yet, within these constraints, many women found ways to wield influence, manage households, contribute economically, and display incredible resilience. But the system was undeniably stacked against them. So, after a life of toil, hunger, and suffering, you die, probably young. The average life expectancy was around 30 to 35 years. But this is skewed by incredibly high infant and child mortality. If you made it to adulthood, you might live into your 40s or 50s, but you'd be considered ancient, your body worn out. Disease was the biggest killer. Dysentery, influenza, smallpox, typhus, and of course, the recurring waves of plague. Famine thinned populations. Accidents in the field or workshop were common. Violence claimed many. Death was a familiar presence, not hidden away in hospitals. Funerals were simple, often hasty to prevent disease spread. You were buried in a simple shroud in the crowded churchyard. And life, for the survivors, moved on quickly. There was no time to mourn for long. There was work to be done.